Dr. Thomas Adams is a lecturer in History and American Studies with the US Study Centre at Sydney University, and he joins us now. Really good to talk to you tonight, Thomas.
Good to be here.
As we heard, President Obama, of course, is in this extraordinary position of being an African American, dealing with some of the worst racist violence, I guess, America has seen for a long time. That legacy of slavery and inherent racism, how much do you think it still plays a part in US society today?
Well, I mean, it certainly plays an incredibly large part, and of course the events in South Carolina the last week or so are clearly an indication of that. But I think a lot of the kind of controversy coming out of South Carolina, I mean, gets at a lot of the deeper aspects of American racism and especially racial inequality that are still prevalent, that, and to some degree the president was pointing out, but I think also speak, I think, to the kind of inability of American society to deal, again, with some of those effects, and in particular coming up with solutions to some of those issues.
And that's what I'd really like your thoughts on, whether this is fueled by deeper problems like the constant disadvantage between the rich and the poor.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, that's one of the issues around the Confederate flag, for instance. I think that makes this particularly a kind of fascinating moment. You've got Nikki Haley, the governor of South Carolina. You've got Walmart, the nation's largest private employer. And between the two, between Walmart coming out against the Confederate flag, and you've got Walmart, which again is responsible for, it's the largest employer of African Americans in the nation, and also the majority of those African Americans working for Walmart work for less than poverty wages. That is to say, they're making under the poverty line while working a full-time job. Similarly, you've got Nikki Haley, an incredibly far right-wing Republican governor who's pandered to the kind of racist right of the Republican Party, who has denied federal assistance for health care under Obamacare for the state of South Carolina, which has tremendously disadvantaged the working poor of South Carolina, the majority of whom are African American. This is a woman who has basically tried to bust unions across the state, unions that are majority African American in many cases in South Carolina. So you can see the kind of the symbolic politics of getting rid of the flag, the Confederate battle flag itself, are not necessarily the same as the actual kind of politics that would get rid of the long-term effects of structural racism in American society.
Yet, Thomas, it remains an important symbol, doesn't it? And you should remind us of the significance of the Confederate flag.
Sure, absolutely. And in fact, it was not the flag of the secessionist Confederate States of America. It was in fact a battle flag used by certain regiments in that army. But it's more important kind of symbolic aspect. It came about in the 1950s as a response to growing pressure from the civil rights movement itself, excuse me, as well as the federal government nationally to basically to force southern states to follow the Constitution. That is to say, on the 14th Amendment, which was passed in 1868 after the Civil War, guaranteed equality under the law. The southern states had denied that through state laws, and over the course of the 1950s and 60s, white Southerners, in trying to massively resist the imposition of equality on them, basically reimagine this Confederate battle flag as a symbol of resistance to essentially equality.
And so it became an emblem of modern white supremacists, didn't it?
Right. Yes, of Southern white supremacists, but of white supremacists in general.
Now, what do you sense the community feeling is about it starting to be removed, at least symbolically, as a way of trying to sort of erase this past?
Yeah, you know, I think the removal of the flag in South Carolina, and it also flies atop a lot of other places across the American South, will probably come to fruition, I would suspect, relatively soon. But again, it's an incredibly symbolic gesture. It doesn't, again, get at some of the forces of, again, structural inequality. It certainly doesn't get some of the forces that are compelling the poverty in both the kind of places like South Carolina, but also places across the American North, like St. Louis, like Baltimore, like New York, where we've seen also issues in the last year regarding racism.
So the irony is that the first black American president will leave office with many of these problems unresolved.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well,
and I think, yeah, and I would just add too that I think, you know, some of the kind of President Obama, the fact that President Obama has African descent itself, it's part of that kind of symbolic solutions to these larger problems. That to see that an Obama presidency would be a solution to this is very much similar to seeing removing the Confederate flag would be a solution as well.
Yeah, too simplistic altogether.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Thomas.
Thank you.